Here's a video with some extra practice over Parachute Man, which is section 9.3. So in the first example here, notice that we've got the side CD is 8. So I'm going to start marking up everything. CD is 8. I know that BD is 16. And they want me to find AD. So I'm going to call that X. Remember, when you're doing this parachute man process, you always want to have the guy parachuting from the big right angle from the big right triangle. So if you're looking at the picture, notice that triangle ABC is the big right triangle, and it's at angle C that the angle is right. So that's where the guy's going to be parachuting. Now remember, he has he has three options. He can go down BC, he can go down CD, or he can go down CA. Those are the three routes that the guy can parachute. But if you look at where I highlighted those sides, notice that the side that was highlighted in blue has a length provided to it. So that means that that's the side that we want to parachute down. So when the guy parachutes down here from C to D, we want to set up a proportion that whatever side he parachutes down, that becomes the geometric mean. So remember from chapter 8, geometric mean means that that's going to be the second and the third term of the proportion, and they're the same. So now the guy has landed down here at D. He has two different options for the distances that he can walk. He can go from D to A, which is what I want to find, which I called that X, so that gets to go in the proportion. Or from D, he can turn in the other direction and he can walk towards B, which is a length of 16 because that was given to us. So here's our proportion. Now we can solve for X. So we're going to cross multiply. X times 16 is 16x. 8 times 8 is 64. And then we just want to divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by 16. If my pen will cooperate. There we go. Divide by 16. And so that gets us X then to be 4. Once again, X is representing AD. That's what I'm trying to find, which means I can circle this. This is my final answer. If we take a look at the next example, I'm going to mark in the picture what we know. So it's saying that AD is 3, BD is 24. They want us to find AC. So I'm going to call that X. Okay, once again, we have to figure out where the guy is going to be starting. Where does he parachute from? Well, in our picture, triangle ABC is the really big right triangle. And once again, it's at C that the right angle happens. So the guy is going to be starting up here at C. So then remember, when he's parachuting, he has three different options. He can go from C to B, he can go from C to D, or he can go from C to A. When I'm looking at those three options, I noticed that what I highlighted in green, which is the route C to A, that is the side that I want to find because I labeled it X. So that means that that's the side that I'm going to have the guy parachute down. And when I have him parachute down in that direction, X is that geometric mean. So remember, the geometric mean is where I'm going to put that twice in my proportion. Now the guy is down here at A. And once again, I want to think about the distance that he can walk. He can walk from A to D, which is a length of 3. Or from A, he can walk all the way to B. Now this is where you have to be careful. 24 is not going from A to B. That's going from D to B. So if I need the whole entire distance, that means I need to add those two values that are representing that entire distance. So 24 plus 3 tells me that 27 is the number that needs to go in my proportion. And now I have my proportion set up and I can cross multiply. So when I multiply x times x, I'm going to get x squared. 3 times 27 is going to give me 81. And now I want to solve for x. Well, notice that because it's being squared, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. That will give me x by itself. Now remember, back in chapter 8, we talked about the fact that when you have a square root, when you took the square root of both sides, you have two answers, both a positive and a negative. The square root of 81 is 9. But now this is where we have to be careful. X is representing the length of the distance that the guy is parachuting down. There's no such thing as a negative distance. So while normally we have two answers, in this case, I only want the positive number. So x represented AC, and that's what we found. So positive 9 is my answer. If we take a look at this last example here, I'm going to start marking up what I know. So AB is 8, DC is 12, AC is what I want to find, so I can call that X. All right, so I have to look to see when I'm doing this parachute man process, where does the parachute guy start? So look at the big right triangle, ABC. Notice that the big right angle is at angle B. So that's where the guy is going to start. So I'm thinking about the different avenues that the guy could parachute. Remember, there's three options. He can go from B to A, from B to D, or from B to C. So if I'm looking at the highlighted portions, I notice that it's at A to B, where the 8 is. That is where I'm going to want to parachute down, because that's the only thing that's given to me with those three different options for him to parachute. So that means in this problem, 8 is my geometric mean. So now the guy is down here at A, and we have to think about, all right, how do I go then the two distances? I want to go from A to D. Here's the issue. I'm not giving us anything for AD, so we have to figure out what that really is going to be. Notice that the other option goes from A to C. So I have that entire option. That's my unknown. I'm going to call that X. So notice then I have to figure out how I'm going to label AD. Well, they gave us 12 for a reason. Okay, notice that in the second problem, I took both of those 24 and 3, and I had to add them together to get the entire length. Well, now in this next problem, I'm actually working backwards. I'm giving you the entire length, even though it's a variable, it's x, and then I'm giving you a portion of what makes up x. So instead of adding, this time I want to subtract. X is the entire piece. When I subtract 12 from it, that's going to get me then that distance from A to D. So x minus 12 is the other portion of my proportion. So I'm going to put that binomial in parentheses, but now I have this set up where I can do my cross multiplication. So that means x is getting multiplied by x minus 12. That equals 8 times 8, which is 64. I'm going to have to distribute that x, so that gives me x squared minus 12x to equal 64. And now we have to recognize that because I have an x squared, an x, and a number, this is going to involve us factoring. But here's the thing. In order to factor, I need everything on one side. I want the x squared to stay positive, which means I'm going to move the 64 over to the other side by subtracting. That will give me x squared minus 12x minus 64 to now equal 0. So with our factoring, because there is no number in front of the x squared and there is no x with the 64, we want to do that basic factoring of what multiplies to the last number, but is going to add to the number in the middle. Okay, so if you're thinking about a bunch of numbers that multiply, because it needs to multiply to a negative number, I know that one of my numbers has to be positive and one of them has to be negative. But if it needs to add to negative 12, I'm not going to use 8 and 8 because then one's positive, one's negative. That's going to turn to 0. So we have to start thinking about other numbers that multiply to 64. There's quite a few options. It's an even number, so definitely 2 goes into it. So then that would be like 2 and negative 32 or negative 2 and positive 32. But notice that when I take then the sum of those, it's not going to get me anywhere near negative 12. But another number then would be 4 and 16. One of them has to be negative. So if I make the 16 negative, that will multiply to negative 64. And notice that when I add those two numbers, 4 plus negative 16 is going to get me the negative 12 that I'm looking for. So when I factor, I'm going to have an x plus 4 for one of the parentheses and an x minus 16 for the other. I can't forget that it is an equation that equals 0. So now I get to set each of those factors equal to 0 to finish solving for x. So x plus 4 equals 0 means we'll have to subtract 4 to move it over to the other side. So I get x to be negative 4. Over here in this equation, I have to add the 16 to move that over, and I get x to equal positive 16. Once again, we're talking about numbers that are lengths. Okay, we're trying to find the AC, which is the length or the distance. And so negative numbers don't work there. So that means that my only answer is the positive number. Notice that it makes sense that 16 is bigger than 12 because once again, 12 and something else are going to form that entire length. So 16 is my answer.